Hey guys, welcome to another dual commentary. I have Clazzert alongside, unfortunately missing Moletrap. This is going to be the Arena MSL, round of 32, Group F. This is the Fantasy Light Firebat Hero and Savior grouping. Should be fun. Let me get the colors out real fast. Looks like we have Light starting in the 9 o'clock position. We have Fantasy starting at the 3 o'clock position, well actually 2 o'clock position in purple. This is on Athena. There's another spawn approximately 5 o'clock. This is that map where it has those kind of raised platforms in the middle, tend to be kind of advantageous towards Terran players. This will be an interesting matchup. I don't know a lot about Fantasy. I know he's on SKT1. I haven't really seen him play, so he's kind of a wild card to me. Light on the other side just can't seem to get it done. He's a really common face. I think he's one of the better Terran players. He tends to be at the top. I think he's a really solid player all around, but he just, for whatever reason, cannot get a championship. And it'll be interesting to see if he can pull it down this MSL season.
Yeah, hi guys. Forget championship. Light is just a player who has failed to deliver time and time again at the professional stage. He makes it into the last 16 or occasionally the round of 8, but that's pretty much the extent of his prowess. And I honestly just think that either you've got it or you don't. And Light has got a pretty solid overall gameplay, but he just doesn't have that something extra special that you need to do that. And I think he falls into that same category. Again, people have said it time and time again about players like C, and there's this whole group of Terran players who have been aspiring to so-called greatness, but have just not been there. And I would call them sort of A-class or B-class players. And I think Light unfortunately falls into that category. On his day, he's capable of taking a game from anyone. But he is more likely to get beaten by the top guys than beat them, in my opinion. Again, eventually any player who makes it big has a stage where you say that about them, but they come out and then eventually prove you wrong. So we've got an early scout going out from Fantasy. Fantasy sending the SCV out straight away to scout. Light putting on his racks and his refinery, and luckily Light is in teal, so that's kind of easy to remember because he's light and he's got a light colored color. Kind of lame. Anyway, so Fantasy's putting down his racks and refinery. Yeah, Diggity, Terran versus Terran mirror matchup on a map like this. What do you think is going to be the general style of play on this map?
Yeah, I'm really curious to figure that out, honestly, because I know there's a lot of. I think it's going to come down to a lot of control in the center of the map. Simply because when it comes down to Terran versus Terran, gas is so important, and there's a lot of gas out there in the middle. I think each of those raised platforms, I think there might even be double gas up there. And it looks like we're going to see some cheese from Fantasy, sending out a second scout there. He might be a little uncomfortable facing Light head up, so it looks like probably going to put down a proxy factory. Only a single. We'll see if it's a single or two. He's also producing Marines alongside. I'm surprised by this, and yeah, he's just going to go straight into Light, and my guess is we'll probably see two factories because honestly he's going to need to. But Light, I'm not sure this is going to be successful because usually when you want that, you want a little bit more of an open space. Light and wow, so basically he's betting everything on this harass, that he can keep that factory harassed and he can get something early and make sure that ramp doesn't get blocked out. Or maybe the other option he might be having is he might go vultures and just try to turn it into an all vulture kind of field fest and hope to beat Light in that regard. Light in the meantime has produced that initial SCV, or I'm sorry, that initial Marine to kind of fight that off. I really don't see Fantasy breaking down that ramp though on the front, and I think Light will be prepared unless he does something stupid, like I don't know, some sort of cheese of his own. In the meantime though, he still hasn't gotten a scout, I don't think, into Fantasy space, so I can't see him doing that.
Well, the other thing is obviously whether or not Light goes for the machine shop first, because that will be something that Fantasy will be scouting off. If Light goes straight away for the machine shop, and now he's setting up the second factory, so as you said, completely committing himself here and just hoping that he has some time. And Light looks like he's got a couple of Marines out to block his ramp, but obviously if Fantasy can get a vulture number advantage going, he might be in a strong position. And Light going for the starport now, so that's actually going to work in his favor. I'm not sure if Fantasy is going to have the foresight to put an armory down. Light having the starport will work in his favor. The problem with that is even if you get a couple of rates out, rates aren't the best when it comes to dealing damage to your opponent, and they're not very good. It would take a while for a wraith to pick off a vulture and actually kill a vulture. But meanwhile, Light is moving out. He's pushing out with a couple of Marines and a vulture. Fantasy's got a couple of Marines to support his vultures as well, but Fantasy's got a couple of extra vultures here, so this initial exchange is going to be crucial in terms of micro. Light managed to save his vulture, Fantasy managed to save his vulture as well. He's managed to kill off the Marines, but now Light knows what's coming. That one vulture is almost dead, but now that Light has given Light the forewarning, he needs to block off his ramp. So he's got his ramp blocked off. He's going to have wraiths popping out. So he's actually going for the control tower as well. That might be a mistake, but this might actually just finish the game here for Light. He might just be in a huge advantageous position after this attack ends, because Fantasy is just going to have to take some time to break up the ramp. Light continuing to pump the vultures, and I just don't think Fantasy is going to be able to get back in this game now. He's got the armory up as well, so that's good for him. Light has gotten a scout in Fantasy's base, but I think Light is probably in the stronger position overall here.
I gotta disagree. I don't think Light's in a very strong position. He doesn't have that second factory to continue to produce the additional units. And as you can see, there's still some SCVs out there. So Fantasy, losing a vulture there. But I think it's just going to be a matter of time before Fantasy can produce those vultures, go and eventually break the lamp. Wow, bringing up actually Goliath now to take on those vultures. He did. Wow, and Light realized it, trying to get a bunker, had to cancel that bunker alongside. Light needs to get tanks out now, and I just don't think Wraiths are going to cut it, especially not against Goliath. Wow, SCV's off the line, and keep in mind, Light still has no idea what's going inside Fantasy's base. SCVs looks like they're going to be able to take out that single Goliath, but still and chasing down that single Goliath. Well, excellent micromanagement by Light, but in the meantime, Fantasy's just taking the economic lead steadily, bringing more Goliaths up. Wow, brilliant maneuver by Fantasy. I like that micro maneuver, putting it into that gap where basically the SCVs have to take it one-on-one. Now there's that first Wraith produced, but it doesn't have cloaking, and it's just going to get picked off by those Goliaths right there, and I just don't think they do enough damage. Tank right there being produced, trying to focus on that tank. Tank being tank goes down, surrounded by those SCVs, and now, wow, complete breach. So Light in a lot of trouble here. Keep in mind, this entire time he's been fighting with about 8 SCVs, which is 8 plus SCVs for Fantasy on the other side, so he's taking a huge economic lead, and still I think Light needed a second factory down to really fend this attack off.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, I didn't realize that at the time because of the. I didn't realize that he was going to switch to Goliaths. I thought it was just a case of him holding the ramp with vultures, which I thought he'd be able to do. But the moment Fantasy made the switch to Goliaths, the moment he saw that starport, he made the switch to Goliaths, and I think that starport is really what killed Light more than anything else. He's now managed to get a siege tank out and has it being repaired by loads of SCVs and defending, so he's finally going to be able to defend, but his opponent is in a very strong economic position. Continue to pump out those Goliaths. He's got an academy up as well, getting a comsat up. I'm not sure the academy and the comsat will bother him as much, but he does have a siege tank out. It's just a question of how much damage his economy has taken. It's taken a huge amount of damage, unfortunately, for him. He's now got 2 siege tanks out, so he's going to be able to defend reasonably well, but unfortunately his economy continues to take a pounding. He continues to kill those SCVs with those Goliaths, and really Light cannot afford that. Once again, bring the Goliaths in range, trying to focus the siege tanks down. Decent micro by Light. Obviously, the siege tanks having greater range than the Goliaths, and it's just a case of keeping the siege tanks alive. That one siege tank, he really cannot afford to lose the siege tank. He needs to keep repairing it. And oh my God, he loses a siege tank. That was critical there. It looks like he's going to lose a second siege tank as well. And unfortunately for Light, at this stage, he's just run out of SCVs to both repair and continue to pump siege tanks and continue to defend. If he can somehow get siege mode going, he might have a little bit of a better chance. Meanwhile, he's got a Wraith in his opponent's base. He's got a Wraith in Fantasy's base. So Light fighting back as hard as he possibly can. The only problem for Fantasy is that he doesn't have a factory in his base, so he's going to have to pull the Goliaths all the way from way back. But meanwhile, Fantasy's getting a starport up at his ramp, which has now been scouted by Light. Light has managed to secure his own base, but obviously his own economy has taken a huge hit. Goliath coming back for Fantasy to take out that lone Wraith of Lights. But Light has actually got cloaking technology. Fantasy does have scan though, so it's just a matter of using the comsat scan, and I don't think he'll mind wasting that. So this game returns slightly in the balance. Fantasy, though, still obviously with the huge economic lead that he got from killing so many of his opponents' SCVs. Light pushing up with the siege tanks. The problem for Fantasy is that he has pumped a lot of resources into those Goliaths, which are not getting taken out. And if he's forced to lift those factories, that's just going to essentially kill the game for him. He really cannot afford to be put in a position. And Light, with slight risk there, pushing out, but he realized that if he can force Fantasy to lift those factories, he's basically going to take the game. Wraith doing damage to the Goliaths as well, and Fantasy now with 3 Goliaths forcing those siege tanks back. Light again with a huge advantage here, and actually it looks like Light might actually be able to come out on top here, Diggity. If he can force those factories to be lifted, that's going to be GG, I feel.
Yeah, if he can just keep the pressure up, keep moving those tanks steadily forward, keep that cloak Wraith annoying and forcing that comsat pulling out there, basically use those that one Goliath shot as you bring the Wraith up and bring the tanks in underneath, he will get back in this game. In the meantime, wow, I like Fantasy. He dropped that bunker in there earlier. Now pushing up, took out an additional tank, but still more tanks pushing up, surrounded by the SCVs. Light knows he needs to basically do something quick here, and he is managing to push up. I don't see additional Goliaths being produced alongside. It looks like what Fantasy is just trying to do is get that bunker down, and once he has that, he's produced a starport of his own to produce Wraith of his own, and this is kind of an interesting position for him. He's continuing to produce Goliaths, and really he can't get the machine shop down, and he needs to keep producing things. But because they're in that proxy position, because Light has it spotted out, this is a really bad spot for him. Looks like Fantasy's producing some Wraiths alongside, but it looks like I'm surprised we haven't seen Siege Tech yet. But wow. It doesn't even need it actually against these Goliaths. Now that I come to think of it, as you can see, Fantasy just trying to bring those Goliaths up, keep them repaired, so he can go and do another frontal attack on Light. But Light, this is what I talk about. He's really, I say he's not the best, but I definitely think he's a high caliber player. Getting right back in this game, if he can take down those 1 or 2 of those factories, he's going to be right back in it, and he's doing an amazing job of adjusting here. Another Wraith going down for Light, but as you can see, continuing to push back those Goliaths. Goliaths are not what you want against tanks. Now it looks like there's another Wraith being produced alongside, and right now with that additional Wraith being killed there is no. Or, I'm sorry, there is a cloaked Wraith right there. Wow, Wraith goes out, so Light just out microing Fantasy right here, and as you can see, and still in a very, very strong position. Looks like he is going to be able to take this factory out. One factory down, so it looks like Light is in fact going to come out with this. This is unbelievable.
Yeah, genius play by Light. I think his stroke of genius was not putting down the machine shop, or sorry, not researching siege tech, and just focusing all his economy on producing raids and producing siege tanks. And obviously we slightly underestimated the cloak rates of Light. Meanwhile, Fantasy's got a firebat and a wraith in Light's base, trying to just buy himself some time, do a little bit of harass. It's not going to matter. The firebat gets taken out. He's got another firebat being produced, but that's going to get killed by the siege tank. At the end of the day, it's not going to do enough damage to Light's economy, and now Light's going to be able to get up the ramp. I think obviously the cloaked rates made a difference, because even though he had the comm set up, even though Fantasy had the comm set up and was setting off the scans, he only had the one command center to work with. So at the end of the day, he was not going to be able to have enough scans to be able to take out the raids, and those raids were a constant harass. And obviously the siege tanks with the superior damage versus the Goliaths, you just don't want to go toe for toe, tanks versus Goliaths. And once Light was able to build up a force of even 2 or 3 tanks, he was able to stay in the game. And really, you have to give Light incredible credit for even surviving the attack with the initial Goliaths. And you were right, he needed to get that siege, he needed to get that machine shop down and get those siege tanks out. And once he was able to actually start producing siege tanks, he was back in the game. But he really held off by just the edge of his pants, and managed to come back in. So great victory for Light, really showing some great potential there. And
That was
I think
unbelievable. Wow.
that sort of victory, yeah, it was as classic a game of StarCraft as you could get, produced by 2 players you wouldn't expect to produce that level of play. But I'm impressed with Light in that game. Certainly his Terran versus Terran looks as sharp as ever.
That was, yeah, I'm really impressed. Keep in mind that entire time he had essentially 8 SCVs off the line fighting the Goliaths inside his base. That's basically, in addition to losing them, that's basically the amount of the just time he's not spent mining, time where Fantasy has the advantage, where Fantasy is basically going up economically, getting additional resources out, and just somehow managing to first of all reclaim his own base, and then additionally push out with the siege tanks and building the Wraith, actually getting that Wraith out there with a cloak, making sure that Fantasy really couldn't adjust back. That it looked like Fantasy was just so worried about a cloaked Wraith, a mass cloaked Wraith attack, that it just wow, he just sticked with Goliaths, and as a result, with just 3 tanks, Light just beautiful micro, just pounding, and able to take those factories out. So wow, that was an incredible match. I haven't seen a match that good, Terran versus Terran, in quite a while. At least not a comeback, I should say, that good. Light really looking good to start, and he's going to go to the winner's match. We're going to see Fantasy go to the loser's match. Next is Firebat Hero versus Savior. I believe Rise is also doing that match, by the way, so check out his commentaries. Are 10 times more hilarious than ours, I think. But should be fun to do that. So thanks for listening, guys.
Yeah, thanks for listening.